And joining me now is David Hawkins. He's the editor of the Fulcrum here in Washington, D.C., and helps break down all the big news that's going on in the nation's capital. And this morning, a lot of Americans are waking up and seeing a familiar name in the news again, Brett Kavanaugh.
Right. It was just a year ago that Brett Kavanaugh got seated on the Supreme Court after the closest vote for a Supreme Court nomination in more than 100 years. He got on the court after those intense Senate Judiciary Committee hearings. Now there's new evidence in a book by two New York Times reporters that was excerpted in the paper over the weekend. New evidence that when he was in college, Justice Kavanaugh may have sexually abused at least one woman who's talking about it and another woman who doesn't really want to talk about it. So it's like deja vu all over again.
Yeah, and the Democrats, some of them are talking about impeachment, looking at the political landscape. Is that something that's viable? Is that something that actually could happen?
You know, seems like a long shot as we're talking now. As we know, that House Democrats are under a lot of pressure to start moving impeachment proceedings against President Trump. They're taking kind of an approach avoidance attitude towards that. You know, so whether they would now, whether this is a fallback position that they want to move impeachment against Justice Kavanaugh, or whether it'll just die of its own weight, too early to tell. Remembering that impeachment is a two-step process. It's actually the House that brings the charges in an impeachment proceeding, and then the Senate conducts a trial, and that Senate trial requires bipartisan majority, essentially a supermajority, which means Republicans would have to go along. Generally, the rule of thumb is they're not going to start impeachment proceedings unless they think they could actually lead somewhere.
Yeah, and looking at the 2020 candidates, many of them are in the Senate. What kind of dividing lines have we seen in terms of how candidates are reacting to this?
So it's been interesting because it's a little bit of a split that kind of echoes where these candidates are in their campaigns. Some of the more progressive candidates, including Senate Judiciary Committee member Kamala Harris of California, are taking an aggressive impeachment, pro-impeachment, let's impeach Kavanaugh stance as we're talking now. But on the other hand, another member of the Judiciary Committee, Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, whose whole candidacy is premised on being sort of a centrist and taking a go-slow approach. She is on the other side. She says we should mainly investigate what the FBI knew or didn't know at the time of these hearings and why wasn't the Senate told. And Joe Biden, who before he was vice president, was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, in that same camp.
Yeah. Another dividing line, it seems, these 2020
They're getting divided all over the place these days.
David, thank you so much. We'll keep an eye on that, and I know we'll have you back to talk about it more. For more stories like these, you can check out The Fulcrum at thefulcrum.us.